Holthe Immigration Q&A with myself and my fearless comrade here, Alicia Backman-Bahari. How are you, Alicia?
I'm well. I'm well. It is definitely December here, and things are kind of getting into the holiday spirit around me. I can see you've got a tree in the background,
I
Mark, so good
do.
for
I
you.
do. I was sharing with the live folks here yesterday in my live the Q&A. In my Q&A, I was sharing my tree and the ornaments and everything on it. And so if I flip back here, I'll just share. I'll show everyone what we've got here. I think I can work this. Yeah. Oh, yeah. So there's a close up of the tree. If I can, this is a neat little feature with my little iPhone. But anyway, so there we go. We can see all the ornaments. Look at that. The Canadian
Canadian passport.
passport.
That's great.
We've got the flag. We've got a loon. That's a loon, you guys. We got the RCMP bear over here, and then a bunch of other things. But yeah, that is our that's the tree for the Holthe family. Well, really, it's more just for me here, but there
It's
we
awesome.
go. Excellent. All right. So those of you who are tuning in, I'm hoping here that we're not going to run into the same issue that we did before. I've been having issues with YouTube connecting in. It's driving me crazy. I can see once again that we have, if I just go back to our screen here, I see that we have Facebook, but for whatever reason, we're running into a little bit of an issue with me seeing the comments on YouTube. And this has happened a couple times now. And so let's just log in here, and I'm going to go to the YouTube channel and open it up, and let's see if we can figure out what's going on here. Dang it, only Facebook is showing. Okay. Well, we're going to have to do it old school again. I thought we had this rectified. Igor and I were working through this yesterday to try to sort it out. And this is a horrible way to start a live Q&A, but yes, we will be talking about some updates within the immigration department. We're going to be talking about some interesting case law that has recently appeared for you TR to PR people. And we're also going to be addressing in our session today all of the questions that you guys have for us. So we will be back in a second. All right, there's our little intro. So what I'm doing here is I'm just trying to log into our feed here so that we can see the comments that people are posting. And right now, for whatever reason, once again, our lovely comments on YouTube are not showing up the way I would want them to show up. So we're going to improvise a little bit here, Alicia, and I'm going to do what I can to manually pull these comments in. So as we go forward, I definitely want you guys to be posting your comments, and I'm going to slide over here, and we're going to experiment. This is on the fly. I was experimenting with a bunch of different things, Alicia, but this one here with the comments that we have here, I'm going to expand the window so they're nice and big, and we're going to do them more manual, rough and tumble. We can go a little bigger here too. This is what I had to do yesterday, but it's all good. So there we go. Now we can see all the comments. So we'll get to all of you guys in just a little bit, and we'll do it this way. So we do have that set up, but oh my goodness, it has been quite the experience coming back from the little trip that I did with Deanna down to Nashville, Alicia. And so as we've been looking at some new ways of doing our Q&As and really everything with respect to the firm and what we're doing, making lots of changes, working through our vision for what we want to accomplish next year, having some really cool things going on with some of our larger clients. There's been no shortage of things going on, all leading up to what's supposed to be a nice Christmas break. I don't know how much of a Christmas break we'll have.
I don't know. Hopefully at least a couple days.
Yeah, absolutely. All right. So those of you who are tuning in, please do post your comments. But before we get to that, let's see, Alicia, where should we start? I think a good place to start is some really good news for those who applied through the TR to PR pathway program and who made mistakes, who, because of the crazy frenzy that existed, especially for the international graduates, who were filing and racing to file their applications back in May of 2021, I think it was, and then realized they had missing documents and have had, are have applications pending, and they're not sure what's going to happen. There was a recent federal court case that Cedric brought to our attention that is really, really positive. So let's just slide over here and let's take a look at this decision. And I am going to, I'm just going to see if I can expand it a little bit bigger here on our screen to make it more visible for those who are watching here. So maybe, Alicia, you can just talk just a little bit about this and just share a little bit of background. So this was December the 8th, so just a little over a week ago that this decision was released. Core v. Minister. So
this is a case where the applicant had submitted an application under the TR to PR stream, and it doesn't exactly say which one, so we're not sure exactly which TR to PR stream.
I think it's the international grads.
Oh, so, yes, you're right. It does say international grad. Yeah. Okay, so we're good on that. And they'd submitted this application before the deadline. However, at the time they submitted the application, they hadn't actually properly uploaded. It was an error on their part in the frenzy to try to get this uploaded properly. They didn't actually submit the proper document to that upload spot on the education documents. What happened was that IRCC's system on the back end, so unbeknownst to the applicant, IRCC had automatically said on September 29th, oh, this is missing the education documents. It's not a complete application. But they didn't say anything to the applicant. And in the meantime, the applicant realized, uh-oh, on October 6th, I didn't put in my education documents properly. So what they did, and kudos to them, was they actually sent in a web form and they said, please attach my education documents. And here they are via web form. Well, good thing they did that because, and this is lucky because back then the web form was actually getting matched to the file in 6 days, which is phenomenal compared to what's been happening recently. So October 6th, she submitted, and October 12th, that was when the actual documents got put onto the file. And luckily, on October 14th, that was the day that a different officer picked up that application and said, oh, wait a minute, because this system had initially said back in September it wasn't a complete application, we're just going to refuse because we're going to say it's not a complete application. And the applicant asked for reconsideration. They said, you know what, this isn't fair. I'd submitted those documents by the time the officer reviewed it on October 14th. It had already been matched to the file on October 12th. And the refusal letter said, no, too bad. So good for them. They took this case to the federal court, and Cedric's been really expanding his practice in terms of federal court judicial review applications because sometimes, guys, this is the only way to actually get any sort of compassionate or reasoned review of what's going on in terms of whether it was a reasonable decision by IRCC in the first place. So it's not as though federal court can just make the decision they want to make. They are reviewing what the IRCC officer did to see whether it was fair. That's it. But luckily for the applicant, they said, look, under the TR to PR program, this is a type of application for permanent residence that ought to be considered with a little bit of flexibility under Section 25 of the Immigration and Refugee Protection Act, which is theoretically the humanitarian and compassionate application section. And they said that, it's up to the officer to be able to assess whether there's missing documentation or they have discretion to request. They don't have to, but they do have discretion. So given the legislative framework for this type of application under Section 25, TR to PR, officers shouldn't be merciless, basically, is what the federal court is saying. Yeah. And the respondent, so in this case, it's the Department of Justice, their lawyers are arguing for immigration, saying, no, 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 we were right, we should have refused this all along. So the respondent in this case is the Department of Justice for IRCC, and they say, no, we have no obligation to ask for new documents. And the court says, that's true, you don't have an obligation to ask. But if at the time that you actually had an officer pick up this file to make a decision, if all the documents were on there, it's not fair for you to refuse it saying it's incomplete. And so that is the good news for people, that if you did happen to submit a TR to PR application under any of the streams, and you realize something was missing, and before you got a refusal, before that officer picked up your file, you had managed to submit a web form, you might be able to make an argument relying on this case. And Cedric's been really building out his practice with reconsideration requests. So maybe you don't have to go to a full judicial review. Maybe you can start with that reconsideration request. Cedric can help you with that. And if that's refused, then maybe you're looking at a judicial review.
Mhm.
But there may be an avenue to save this if you're in one of these situations. You did a TR to PR, you uploaded via web form, and you still get a refusal.
And it's interesting, Alicia, when we look at this history, because there's a lot of discussion in the months immediately following the filing, especially for the international graduates, because of the race to file. People made mistakes. Now, to a large extent, a lot of the international grads have worked their way through the system. A lot of them have, but there's still a lot of people who have just had their acknowledgments of receipt, and when it comes to the application itself, there hasn't been any adjudication on it. So there's people that may very well be in this situation that that Core was, and if they have an application where IRCC comes back and rejects it, then that's the time to contact our office immediately, and don't delay, because there's a limited window of time. But if the facts line up closely with Core here, then there's a really good chance that we can be successful in getting consent, and the Department of Justice sending it back and saying, yeah, you're right, Mark, this is similar to Core, and officers can't just do this. And ironically, as we look at the way the government has been going, for years, our Liberal government really emphasized open transparency, and they really changed a lot of things within Parliament to open up to the world what was happening within the decision-making process, and allowing access to documents and all these kinds of things. But over the last stretch, we've really seen, in an effort for them to try to deal with these processing times, they make quick decisions. They don't have the same amount of time, the officers, to review applications carefully. And I can't help but feel at times that officers are rewarded equally for processing an application, whether it's an approval or a refusal. And it's a whole lot easier to just kick something back and move on to another file than it is to take the time to process and to go through everything or request additional documents. And you remember as well, Alicia, I'm not sure if you followed some of the Twitter feeds, but IRCC had tweeted to candidates that they were not to, and if I go to my Twitter feed, I had my own comments about it, but they were not to submit extra documents. And what does that mean for the average person? It means that if you're not aware of your rights to be able to update a file, that you're going to put yourself in a position where you may lose out on an opportunity because of a mistake that you made, because immigration says, well, don't update it. Well, if you don't update it or fix the mistake, it gives them an easier reason to refuse.
Yeah,
So I don't know
it's
what your
not
thoughts
fair.
are. Yeah, I don't know what your thoughts are on that, Alicia, as we, just kind of apply this to the people watching.
I have a number of thoughts on that. So there's been a few things that have happened recently. One of them is that we were able to see some processing instructions when we get those access to information and privacy requests on what officers are being told to do in terms of how they process files. And you're right, Mark, absolutely. Their directive from IRCC is you process these files as fast as you can process these files. Don't spend a whole bunch of time, don't put anything in GCMS notes, and batch your files. So group your files in groups of about 20 applicants, ideally, to be able to do search criteria and then, send them off for processing as quickly as possible. So that's kind of the world we're dealing with right now. So depending on what officers are searching for, they're probably only getting like a screen that shows a few parameters for each applicant. They're lining them up to group them, and then they're either going to group approve or group refuse, or say that some need to be, taken some more time with. In terms of what's been going on with the web form, this is craziness. I mean, the only practical way that we have of doing anything on a file these days, of being able to access or reach out, the only thing anybody has these days is a web form.
Yeah.
And so for IRCC to turn around and say, don't give us documents on web form unless we request them, is completely bogus, because there are circumstances where your life has changed. It is important for you to upload documents. Or if you, like a TR to PR applicant, forgot something and you put it back on there, if you hadn't taken the initiative to do that and you just listened to IRCC saying, don't send us stuff by web form, you're going to miss out. You might miss out on your PR. You might get kicked out of Canada. So this is the only option that people have, and it's the only viable option. So use it when you need to.
Absolutely. Yeah. And it's hard because, I also read an article recently, and this is the tweet, just for people who are wondering about this "don't submit web form" tweet that came from IRCC. You can see this tweet was deleted by the tweet author. And so, so these are just some of my comments. This really is so misleading. You're extremely quick to find misrep in someone's application because they forgot to mention a U.S. visa refusal 20 years ago. However, this statement is really bordering on misrep by commission. So I was very critical of them in the tweet, and very quickly when we brought this to the attention of the policy folks within IRCC, because clearly whoever's managing their social media account took their orders from someone. Probably someone who was overrun with applications and just wanted to find a way to stop having people reach out and send stuff. Anyway, so they deleted that tweet. So you can see the power of public opinion and public shaming sometimes in the social worlds and in the media has a tendency to drive policy for immigration. So it's a sad world that it has to be that way. But that's part of the reason why within the firm we've added that new section, Alicia, and Cedric is really driving the ship for legal help when it comes to judicial reviews and reconsideration requests and writs of mandamus. And that's something else that we didn't have a chance to talk about, at least yesterday, but all the individuals who have had their files just languishing. Why? Well, CBC came back, right? Do you want to talk a little bit about that, Alicia?
Exactly. So that's the other thing that just happened recently, was there was a news release because the media outlets in Canada also decided to do an access to information and privacy request. And they said, we want a list of all the files that are linked to officers that are no longer working at IRCC.
Yeah.
And there's thousands of them. Like, not just a couple, lots and lots of files are linked to officers that no longer work at IRCC. And this seems fairly scandalous. So IRCC came back and said, oh, no, it's okay. We did that on purpose. So apparently they're saying that this is a way that they are using to triage these files. But come on, this is not a transparent way of being able to show people that you are processing your applications properly.
And this is the
this
article.
is
I'll show it very quick. There you go. It's gone because the lovely media actually sued me and made me pay them for promoting their own articles. And so I'm kind of pissed at them, I'll be honest. Anyways, but so I don't even promote the mainstream media stuff anymore because heaven forbid I show an image of something that they've copyrighted. But anyways, great article. So yes, Alicia, sorry to cut in on that.
Yeah, you guys can look it up. Just go look at, kind of search for it. It's been, what was the day it was released, Mark?
It was released on December the 12th, so 3 days ago, and thousands assigned to inactive immigration officers and IDs. Are you one of them? So
there you go. So search that in whatever web browser you want, and then go find the article. You can actually search that article for the ID number. So if you happen to have had an application that's been languishing for a long time and you're curious and you had done your own access to information and you got the GCMS notes and you're able to figure out which officer code was assigned your file, you can actually search that news article to see if that officer code is one that's associated with your file. If you've gone and done an access to information and privacy request on your own application and you happen to know the officer number.
On the YouTube channel, I've just posted a link to it. So those of you who are watching on YouTube, you can just slide over there and there's a link I posted in the comments to the actual article.
So what this means is there are thousands of applications that have been sitting there for a long time. So most of these have not been processed, and it's been, over a year. So if you're in that boat, then it might be time for you to think about doing what's called a mandamus application, where you are asking the Federal Court of Canada to direct immigration to make a decision on this file because it has been outside of the reasonable parameters of time that it would normally take. So a writ of mandamus is something that a lawyer has to do, and so Cedric is able to do this on behalf of you, the applicant, and it has to be filed properly with the Federal Court of Canada, and there are a bunch of things that you'd have to do to help make sure that this is done properly. You've got to swear an affidavit and provide the evidence, and then the court then is going to decide whether they are going to grant this application to basically tell immigration, look, you've got to make a decision on this file. And usually you structure it to request that they make a decision within X amount of time, or that they take another material step on processing that application within X number of months.
Yeah. And if you want to learn more, you can see here, all you need to do is go to legal help at the top and then just click on apply for a writ of mandamus here. And then Cedric has actually drafted a really, really good blog post that explains what it is, what the legal test is to be successful in making such an application to the court, and just how you would work with us in the context of doing this. So it's a really, really great post. I encourage you to go take a look at it. But also with refused applications and things like that, there's other information on judicial reviews and the process involved with that. Wonderful articles that I'd encourage you to take a look at. And of course, we've got videos on the YouTube channel as well that that cover a lot of this information. So yes. And then I guess the last piece, which everybody is talking about, and I can't remember, I think Alicia, you'd sent me the email, I think, did you? The updated email.
Yes.
Let me just pull this up here, see if I can find it.
So this is kind of news in terms of what is happening with Express Entry, because everybody probably has realized by now that, as soon as the draws open back up in July, immigration's been kind of routinely doing a draw every other Wednesday. So every second Wednesday, they tend to do a draw. And well, lo and behold, last Wednesday, December 7th, there was no Express Entry draw. So there was the last draw on November 23rd. And of course, everybody knows, or maybe you don't know, but what happened right before November 23rd was that on November 16th, that is when we switched, or the federal government switched from going with the 2016 National Occupation Classification Code to the new Tier 2021 National Occupation Classification Code. And what happened because of that was all sorts of chaos within the Express Entry system. And it resulted in people not getting the proper points in their Express Entry profiles, getting extra points in their Express Entry profiles. When they were trying to enter their work experience because of the changeover from the NOC, it was making them ineligible for PNPs for some situations. So all sorts of chaos has broken loose because of this, and immigration is seemingly still in the process of trying to be able to fix it.
Yeah. All right, let's see if I can pull this up, and I'll just show you here. And this might be things that you guys are experiencing. All right, I'm gonna mix this up a bit. I'm gonna do something a little bit creative here. I think I should be able to get the right one word. There we go. Okay, let's see if we can enlarge this a little bit so that everybody can see what we have, and then we'll just stretch this out. Oh, I've got lots of room. It's a little rough, but you guys can see. So this is the text essentially that IRCC had sent to the Canadian Bar Association and other stakeholders, just explaining what was going on and, why are the rounds of invitations not happening? Well, you can see that they, as a result of the NOC 2021, IRCC says they're aware of the ongoing IT issues impacting EE clients, including those in the PNP as a result of the NOC 2021 implementation on November the 16th. And remember, when was the last draw? Well, if we go back, I won't go back, but anyways, that the last draw was following this rollover. Essentially, they did it and realized, oh my goodness, there's a disaster. So they're aware that PNP clients with nomination certificates, well, of course, they all have 4-digit codes, are experiencing challenges when trying to update their profile using the synthetic code 93888 which in some cases is rendering profiles ineligible to receive ITAs. So you can see how crazy this is. This code was generated by IRCC as a workaround. Oh boy, a workaround that's basically, we're going to use
Not
you guys
working.
as guinea pigs. Yeah, to ensure applicants could continue to be assessed under NOC 2016. Well, I think, Alicia, you'll probably remember as we were doing a lot of our reviews, the system flips back and forth between 2016 and 2021. And, it says 4-digit code, and then it only gives 5-digit options. And then when you go out and then go back in to look at your your EAPR work history again, it disappears. And the information, that the changes that you've made, it reverts back to a blank space. So there are all these kinds of things. But it also, you can see there's another major issue that they're acknowledging. And so if you're experiencing these things, understand that you're not alone. So they're also aware of the issue where clients are being informed by the system that they meet the MECs for the Canadian Experience class, that you're eligible, when you don't have sufficient Canadian work experience. In some cases, they have only a couple months and they received an ITA. So due to this error, you can see a number of ITAs were incorrectly issued to candidates, including some PNP candidates during the November 23rd round of invitation. So IRCC is closely examining the issue, among others. In other words, there are even more than what they've listed here. And they're working as quickly as they can to address these challenges and find solutions. In other words, as of the date when this was sent, and I can't remember, Alicia, what was the date this email came through?
I think this was on Wednesday, so this was
Wednesdays.
yesterday.
Yeah, just yesterday. We will advise you as soon as we have more information. So we're requesting that provinces and territories direct clients to our web form to report any technical issues. And then of course, whatever, following message. So yeah, so I just wanted to share that with everybody because we have these discussions, and I told them, I told those that were joined in yesterday that the reason there hasn't been any draws, some people said, well, maybe the quota is full, and that's why. But really, you guys, it's really as a result of the technical problems of rolling over to 2021. And,
Yeah.
Let's be honest, who really believed that it was going to go seamlessly? Like, has anything gone seamlessly, right? So, all right. Okay. So those are some of the things that we wanted to highlight for sure. And I guess there's just a couple little additional things. I hope I still have it here. Yes, I do. Okay, a couple little things that I want to also announce just at the beginning before we jump into the Q&As. Another one is our upcoming Cellpip webinar, a live webinar that we're doing with Cellpip. And remember, you've got IELTS and then you've got Cellpip as the two English language testing associations, and they're going to give some general overviews of it, but they're also going to have a Q&A session associated with it. So you can register for this webinar. It's in a collaboration with Cellpip and our law firm. And you can enter your name, email address, and then we'll get you notified. And this is going on December the 20th. So with 5 days, we are going to be launching this at 1 p.m. Mountain Time. So if you're looking at applying through Express Entry or any of the permanent resident programs really these days, except, sponsorship, the vast majority require language testing. And
Wait,
IELTS,
Mark,
oh, yes,
is it free?
it's free. Yeah, no charge.
There you go.
There you go. It is absolutely free to register for it. And so the many people all over the world just think first of IELTS, the only option. But increasingly, Cellpip is expanding their test locations, and we're going to talk about that as well in the webinar. And they're all in major centers: India, the Philippines, UAE, all over. So yeah, definitely come register, and there's a link in the description below. And we'd love to share, some insight and be there to support you, and pull in the heavy hitters from Cellpip to join us and to answer questions that you have related to this. So there we go.
Mark, that's really, really important too. So the fact that we're offering this free webinar is really trying to help prepare people for those language test exams, because they're so important for most of the immigration programs, the economic programs. Almost everybody is going to benefit enormously if you have a higher language exam result. And so the higher those language exam results are, the better the chances that you're going to qualify for a number of options under your economic streams, or if you're looking at express entry in particular, The difference in language score is huge when you're looking at your overall CRS. So pay attention to those language exams. Make sure that you're taking the one that's going to best serve you because they are a little bit different. And it's also going to give you the best shot once you prepare and study for those exams and hopefully do well. Those higher marks are going to give you the best shot to immigrate to Canada.
Exactly. Okay, let's see if we can get this sorted out. It's always a little bit tricky when I'm doing this now because I have I can't bring the comments on the way I normally did. We definitely have to troubleshoot this. We actually did a little bit of a experimentation yesterday, Alicia, after my live to see if we could figure it out. We thought we had it. We thought we had it sorted out, but then I updated my eCam and apparently, yeah, it didn't work. So what we're going to do is just go through some of the comments here, and hopefully most of them are worth pulling up. But anyways, we've got Sale here, says joining after a while. Great to have you. Christmas greetings from Intelligent. And Branded Boy says, hi, can you clarify about the validity of Indian police clearance certificates for Canadian PR purposes? I'm on a work permit now, but will load my file for PR on next year, but I'm applying for my Indian PCC now. So maybe, Alicia, you can just hit for this one, just on the basic rules for police clearance certificates for Branded Boy here.
So take a look at the IRCC directives on police certificates. If you're looking specifically for express entry, they're very specific what they want for express entry police certificates, and you can go to the website and make sure that you've checked it. But in general, you want to make sure that any country that you're currently residing in, you're getting a police certificate that is up to date, that is no older than 6 months old. So that is really important that you have that updated police certificate for any country that you used to live in and any country you've lived in continuously for 6 months or more since you've turned age 18. You also need to get a police certificate, and that police certificate should have been issued after the last day that you were there. So go through your travel history, go through kind of your life history, and make sure that you've got police certificates for the previous countries that you used to reside in as well. And if those police certificates have expired, as long as you got them after the last time that you lived there, that should be sufficient.
All right, let's go back to our next question here. This is from IRB Fox, past alumnus of the Express Entry system and client. Howdy, Mark and Alicia. Season's greetings. Haha, love the tree. Okay, great. Love the tree. I got Portal 2 last Thursday and is waiting for eCoper. Is there an estimated time for eCoper? Couldn't have done it without you. I know that this process right here has become also disastrous. So we are seeing people who are waiting over a month or longer. I have one client, an HNC client actually, who has gone through that process and has been sitting there waiting for, well, it's probably been 6 weeks or longer now. We're almost pushing into 2 months for him. So this is something that's horrible. And yeah, Alicia, I don't know if you have any extra thoughts on that.
Well, I guess I'll do a bad news, good news, because we have seen more clients getting their files processed. And I actually had two good news stories. I had one where it was a in Canada spousal sponsorship, and they were able to get their landing just recently. So they got their confirmation of PR email, and they've gone and they've submitted their confirmation through the PR portal. It remains to be seen how long it'll take for that eCoper, but at least they've been approved, and it was approved really quite quickly. So that was great news. And the other one was a fairly complicated Alberta PNP file where that application was also just recently approved, and it was done fairly quickly, which is fantastic. Like we're talking about 4 months. So from submission to actual acceptance. So the good news is they're making decisions, but there are issues to sort out with the eCopers actually being generated.
Yes. Okay, we've got Ahmad Genova here. I work part-time now. That means, and the question is, does that mean that I have to work 6 years to claim the maximum points for work experience?
So be careful about whether you're looking at work experience in terms of foreign work experience or work experience for Canadian work experience. So if you're looking at express entry, you've got to meet the minimum eligibility criteria for either federal skilled worker class or for CEC. If you're looking at federal skilled worker class, then within the last 10 years, you have to have worked continuously outside of Canada for continuously at least 1,560 hours in your primary or the key knock that you are claiming. So if you don't meet that, you can't meet those minimum eligibility criteria. So it's not clear, which country you've been working in. If you're looking at Canadian work experience and you want to meet the minimum eligibility for Canadian work experience under CEC, then you can put together your part-time work experience as long as you have an authorization to work in Canada. It's authorized legal work that you're able to do with a work permit, and you're working for a Canadian employer in a high-skilled occupation. And if you're able to properly do it, you've got to look at how many hours you've been working in each part-time job, and you can't, like if you're working 2 different part-time jobs, you can't claim more than 30 hours in any given week. But if you are able to, over a 24-month period, to look at every week and kind of figure out how many hours you worked, let's say you give yourself credit for half time, 15 hours a week. If you're able to do that over a 24-month period, then that's going to add up to at least 1 year, 1,560 hours of the equivalent of full-time Canadian work. And then you'd meet that minimum eligibility criteria. Once you've met that minimum eligibility criteria, then you've got to look at whether you can get credit for the other types of work you've been doing. So just take a look at the requirements for minimum eligibility and then the points for foreign work experience or Canadian work experience.
Yes. All right, let's pull this in, see how big it is. Oh, that's bigger than I thought. Let's see here. Let's shrink, see if I can shrink this down. Can you do it? No. Okay, we'll just leave it like this. Okay, so Shale says I have, and this is a classic example of the glitches. So I have about 3 months of Canadian experience. However, the criteria section on my profile wrongly says I have met CEC criteria. However, my CRS score is calculated correctly. Will this affect the ITA? Well, what are your thoughts on that, Alicia?
Good question, Shell, because this is now what's IRCC doing to try to fix this problem, because we're not exactly sure why for some reason, all of a sudden it started counting Canadian CEC criteria when people are just showing that they have only a little bit of work experience in Canada. Because you're totally able to say that you have a little bit of work experience in Canada. That's allowed. But the problem is that the system is incorrectly crediting you for a full year, which it shouldn't be doing. So as long as your CRS is calculated correctly, as long as you've not misrepresented on your application, then hopefully you're doing things correctly, and it's up to IRCC to amend their system. But it remains to be seen how they're actually getting rid of these glitches in their profile, because they did give ITA mistakenly to people
Yep.
in that November 23rd draw. And I don't know what's going to happen with that, because on one hand, it's not fair for them to have gotten an invitation to apply. It's not their fault, it's not the applicant's fault. But on the other hand, I'm sure Department of Justice and IRCC is going to say, well, they didn't meet the minimum eligibility criteria, so we're going to take away those ITAs just as soon as we gave them.
Exactly. All right, let's pull in another one here. Okay, this one, Hikin says, hey, Mark and Alicia, why a permanent resident application has 2 visa offices, primary and secondary? What are the differences? So I think this is in the context of processing, and sometimes it goes from one place to another. Maybe you can just talk loosely about this whole global network where they can send anything anywhere now.
Yeah, so there are usually a number of officers who will pick up the file and take a look at it and then send it along the chain. And so most of the time there's some sort of completeness check that is done, where an officer will pre-screen that application and just make sure that it meets all the minimum criteria. And so for express entry, we always say, go take a look at those completeness check criteria. It's really helpful. But the next officer who's going to pick up that file is then probably going to review it in a little bit more detail. And if they believe that everything checks out in terms of you're getting the points that you ought to be getting, that you're claiming, then they'll probably send it along down the line. And if there's something, a little bit odd about your work history or a letter of employment, or they're not sure about part of your application, they may send it to somebody else to kind of scrutinize a bit more carefully, or they may just send it on for processing and doing background and security checks to make sure that you're medically admissible and there's no criminality or there's no flags or misrepresentation on your file.
All right, next comment here. This one's from Lotfi. He says, hello, Mark. I received my COPR a while back. Just want to say thank you for all the videos. You've been a great help. I will give you an applause there, Lotfi. Thank you so much. We love to get that positive feedback. All right, so I'm trying to do this a little bit more manual, so I have a little bit more control over the comments. Okay, Rouse says, can I apply, and this is kind of continues on a little bit, Alicia, from what you're talking about. Can I apply with 1,560 hours work experience for EE, or do I need to complete 1 year to claim the points for Canadian experience? Does completing 1,560 hours count for 1 year?
So this is part of the assessment that we do when we talk to clients about whether you meet the minimum entry requirements for the program. And it really depends on how you've gained those hours and how you're counting them. So as part of what we do when we meet with people, when we have a consultation and you decide whether you want to work with us to hire us to help you go through your express entry application, we have a tool, and it's an hours of work calculation tool. We have one for federal skilled worker, we have one for CEC, and we actually get people to go through and carefully reconstruct all of their hours, all of their weeks, all of their months of work, and make sure that they are properly claiming all of their points for that work experience, and that they are meeting those minimum eligibility criteria. Because you can't claim 1,560 hours if you are counting on, let's say, 40 hours in a given week. IRCC caps it at 30 hours in any given week. So it really does depend.
Yes. All right. Okay, next up here. Let's see, I think this is the same one. Okay, so this is a spousal. So Assis says, I sponsored my husband for a permanent residence and have been abroad since then because he can't enter. And I had a baby in the meantime. And now I'm waiting for the baby's proof of citizenship. When the PR gets approved, will the baby's, I think, speed it up or slow it down? I'm assuming that if they're outside of Canada, and I'm also assuming that this person, one of the concerns I have is whether or not they're considered to be, whether they're a Canadian citizen, So maybe you can address this one. It's a little bit different, but it's perfectly in line with our spousal sponsorship DIY course. What are your thoughts on that one, Alicia?
So, and I know I wrote an article on this too. I think it might have been the inside versus outside Canada spousal sponsorship. And are you eligible to apply under which category? So make sure that you yourself are eligible to sponsor your spouse, because the problem is most of the time you've got to make sure that you are physically residing in Canada to be able to show that you have an intent for both of you to live in Canada after your spouse gets sponsored. So that's something that immigration is going to be concerned about if you're not physically present in Canada. They really want to see that intention that you are going to be in Canada. Now, it does make sense that if you had a baby and you're waiting for the baby's documentation and passport, probably, that it's important to make sure that you get those documents uploaded and updated on that file to show, if you're doing an application, to show that you have a new family member, and it goes to the genuineness of the relationship also. So it is evidence that you want to update on that spousal sponsorship. Yeah, so take a look between, there's two. There's, are you eligible? Yeah, and the difference between inside and outside. So both of these are going to talk about in which circumstances can you actually submit an outside Canada application versus an inside Canada application. And the other one is, are you eligible? So just at the bottom of the page there. Is your spouse admissible? Yeah. So this is the other article that you can go and take a look at.
Perfect. All right. Okay, let's jump to our next comment. So, what do you think? Any idea when CRS draws would resume, Alicia?
Well, we would hope that it's going to be, within the next 2-week period that it ought to have been, right? So it hopefully will be next Wednesday, but we just don't know how long it's going to take them to sort out all these glitches on their system.
Yeah. And I think really that's what's driving the ship. That's the real concern that we have. Oh, boy. So fixable, Alicia. These things are so correctable. All right. Next question. So this is from Masari. Hey there. Thank you for answering questions. My work permit ends January 29th, 2023. and I'm waiting to receive my ITA. I had to decline my ITA before this as I couldn't get my PCC on time. Okay. Well, I didn't see a follow-up question to this. This is more a statement of the real difficult situations that people find themselves in, especially when they made a decision to decline, kind of one of those birds that they have in hand to hopefully get a more secure, application, a more guaranteed application because of delayed document receipt. So, yeah, I don't know if you have any just overall thoughts or just, oh, we're sorry for you, sorry, and hopefully this is, we're going to see a draw here before the end of the month so that you can take advantage of that.
Yeah, and you know, hopefully immigration realizes that when they pause these draws without notice and people are relying on having regular express entry draws because status is going to expire, especially when we've just come through COVID and people have had to do all sorts of craziness to try to make sure to extend their documentation to keep their valid temporary status in Canada. Well, we had regular draws every 2 weeks since July up until November, and then this switch over to tier has caused problems. But this is exactly the situation that Asari's got, where their work permit's expiring at the beginning of January or end of January, beginning of next year, and they were counting on getting that invitation to apply. And for some reasons in some countries it is hard to get those police certificates, and you're right by being worried about that, because it's possible that an officer just says, we're going to refuse your express entry application if you don't have a police certificate. That's something that's quite possible. So it makes sense to decline the ITA, go back into the pool, and hope to get a new invitation if you've got a high CRS. But now the clock is ticking if they don't start opening up draws regularly.
All right. Okay. Next up on our list here. Oh, I think I got that one. Yeah, that's the one we just did. So we'll push this down here. It's a little bit trickier doing it this way. Okay. All right. So this is kind of an open-ended one from Jojo. So it says, can persons in insurance claim points under the certificate of qualifications from a Canadian province or territory? That's via the CEC application. Well, I don't think it is. But anyways, you can maybe clarify this for Jojo here.
Yeah, Jojo, it's not under the CEC application. So carefully take a look at the minimum eligibility program requirements. There are actually 3 classes of express entry application. One's the federal skilled worker, one's the Canadian experience class, and the other one is the federal skilled trades. And it's only if you are one of those particular NOT codes as a trade that you would actually be looking at a certificate of qualification. So these are like red seal designations and ones that are regulated trades in Canada. You actually have to go through usually a provincial process or a provincial and regulating body process in order to get that certificate. This is separate than CEC. It's not part of CEC. In order to do this, you have to be able to qualify under federal skilled trades occupations and prove that you have the qualifications to be able to operate in that field. Like, you can't just come to Canada and be a welder. You have to make sure that you've passed all your regulations and the requirements of the regulatory provincial regulatory body to be able to do that occupation.
All right. Next up here is Joe Ben. He says, hi for both from Algeria. Finally got my COPRA and visa. Congratulations. Do you think we should come with my family now or wait to April because of the weather? We're going to New Brunswick. All right, Alicia, what do you think for Joe Ben here?
Oh, Joe, it's funny, not funny, because there is a very big storm system that happens to be moving across North America right now. There's been news articles. They have had like snow tornadoes in the US. Canada, Eastern Canada is also getting pummeled with snow over the next week. So it just depends if you are what your family situation is. Generally, once you have your COPRA and your visa, you do want to make sure to travel and land as soon as you can, because that's when you actually become that full Canadian permanent resident if you're outside of the country. So it's only once you actually land and that officer signs off and you actually have a signed confirmation of permanent residence that you are a full PR. So up until then, things could happen. So you always want to make sure that you've actually secured your permanent residency. And then once you get to Canada, that you're gaining your residency in Canada obligations. You live in Canada at least 730 days out of every 5-year period. So, you know, it is probably a little bit snowy and stormy for the next little bit. You might want to wait to make sure that giant storm has passed by and the flights are still operating, but I would say otherwise come as soon as you can.
Yeah, I agree. Okay, apply for spousal visa in 2021. 11 months have passed, biometrics and medical. My wife lives in Canada, applied for me from Canada. How long will it take to get the visa? Where can I contact about? So I can share this one, Alicia, because realistically, it's a pretty simple process, and the government is not bad now about doing this. So if you just go in here and you type in IRCC processing times, it will take you here. Then you can go in and you can select the one that applies to you. So application type, it's family sponsorship. Who are you sponsoring? A spouse living outside Canada, and then get the processing times. So you can see this is a global figure, which also kind of frustrates me because they have the data for each visa office. This isn't an uncertain period of time, but you can see they have processing right now 18 months, and some province, and that was just last updated just yesterday. So this is really, really current. Any thoughts on that, Alicia?
Yeah, it does seem to really depend upon when you submitted your spousal sponsorship application, because as I said, I had a few spouses who have submitted their spousal sponsorships with me, so I was helping them on their applications, and they were submitting those this spring, and they've been already landed by the fall. So, and that was an outside Canada application.
Mm-hmm.
So it really does depend, because we did hear stories of people who applied, back in 2021, and those files are just sitting. So it depends which country you're living in, and it also depends when you filed the application, because there is a backlog on some of those applications.
Okay. Next up here, we have a question from Shanaz. What are the chances of 479 score? We have to have at least one of these, Alicia. It's a mandatory requirement.
So keep in mind, Shanaz, that we had the November 23rd draw was at 491, so that's still quite high. And it's only been going down a few CRS points, right? Like 5 maybe. So it's probably only going to go down possibly another 5. And the problem with this is now that they didn't clear anything out of the pool. So those updated figures were only up until November 22nd. And so if you look at the pool as of November 22nd, people have had an extra 2 weeks to kind of put new applications in and build up in there. So there's actually going to be way more people in there than the old figures indicate right now. So it's probably going to be some time before that CRS comes down into the 470 range. But that said, IRCC has said they are going to start doing targeted draws in the spring. I'm guessing it's probably going to be a little bit delayed now because they have so many issues with the rollout with tier. And it's possible that they will be selecting certain tier knocks when it comes to the targeted draws, but we just don't know. They haven't said how that will work. So maybe it's not just your overall CRS that's going to make a difference as of next year. Maybe they will start to target certain occupations or work experience or language or French or who knows what else. But hopefully it'll come down. I don't know when it'll come down to a 479 though, or if you might have to wait for a targeted draw.
All right. Okay, let's tackle our next question here. Okay. Oh, yeah, we got that one. I better remember what I've pulled on here. It's a little bit more challenging. Okay. Okay. Hello, Mark and Alicia. For skilled workers for PR under a provincial nomination, express entry, shall I declare the equity of my real property and mortgage? If yes, where shall I fill in this information? Thanks. So,
Yeah, and Michelle, this is always an issue because it becomes a little bit complicated when you're looking at settlement funds if you're under a PNP. And so, in general, people don't have to provide settlement funds if there's one of two things. If you were nominated under a CEC, so you got an invitation under CEC, then you don't have to provide your settlement funds. If you also were put in your profile and you properly claimed arranged employment points, and take a look at my video about that, but if you claimed and you were given points for arranged employment in your express entry profile, you also don't have to prove settlement funds. However, if you had a PNP nomination, it really depends on what that specific program under your PNP required, because some of them have financial requirements. And so you're going to have to prove that you met all the financial requirements of the PNP program. And then it depends on whether you do also meet the CEC requirements. So if you can prove everything on the PNP front in terms of financials, then if you do have at least 1 year of Canadian experience and you qualify under that, maybe you can make an argument. But most of the time, to be safe, you should be showing that you meet those settlement funds. And when they look at the settlement funds, they want to make sure that that is money that is not, it's your money outright. It's not loans on it, or
Yeah.
you don't have liens on the property, or there's no creditor in the background. So make sure that over and above what you owe the bank, you have enough money to meet your settlement funds.
Essentially, they want to make sure that you haven't gotten your loan from a loan shark, and Guido's going to come after your family when you don't pay it back, and you're in
Yeah.
Canada.
Yeah. And in terms of where do you fill in that information, it's going to pop up on your EAPR. It's going to pop up as a field for proof of funds.
Yes. And this is a fair comment from Pavneet, and I wanted to pull it on here. So many people are feeling this way, Pavneet. And we're just we're kind of conditioned to try to become hardened to this, and to just realize that this is just the way it is. But yeah, immigration isn't fair, even in TR to PR application approval. So many people applied without IELTS results, still getting approval for PR. Now, we can't speak to this, and Pavneet, you're dealing with a lot of rumors and innuendos, and I'm sure there are people that manage to get their way through the process, the TR to PR, with missing documents. You've also seen, as the case that we showed you today, that people that genuinely tried to update it and correct it also got their applications rejected. But that's why the federal court is there. That's why us immigration lawyers are here to help, find equity and find a remedy when bad things happen. But yeah, there's people that don't qualify that get through. Some people are scammers. Some people have fake documents and they've misrepresented, and immigration hasn't found out. Others are not eligible, but the officer's the junior officer and just misses it and accepts and processes in the application when someone wasn't qualified. And then, of course, Pevneet, that person is shouting to the rooftops, haha, I didn't have my IELTS and I was able to upload it later and my application still got approved. So yes, it's sad when those situations happen.
But keep in mind, there's also misrepresentation, which is the great levelizer. And so sometimes when people squeak through, or they do something that was not fair themselves, or misrepresentation, or they didn't tell the truth, then that's going to come back to haunt them when they try to go and file an application for PR card renewal, or maybe when they try to apply for their citizenship or sponsoring somebody else. So, it's not without consequences. Always make sure that you're doing the right thing.
Yes. All right. So Terry Lilly here says, hey, what's the easiest way to come to Canada from Kenya? And he says, with a work permit. So maybe just hit briefly on the foreign worker program, which we are very busy with right now.
Mm-hmm. So most of the time, if you're coming from a visa required country, so Kenya is a country where if you want to come to Canada and visit or work, you also need to have a temporary resident visa. So if you are coming from a visa required country, then most of the time the requirement is that if you have an employer in Canada, if you're one of the lucky people who is able to find an employer in Canada who's able to go through that LMIA process, the Labor Market Impact Assessment process, then that employer will have had to have advertised and recruited for 4 weeks continuously. Then they submit an LMIA application to ESDC. ESDC normally takes a couple months to adjudicate it. And then if they were approved that LMIA and they named you as a named worker on that LMIA, then you are able to submit that work permit online from outside Canada with that associated LMIA number. And then once that work permit gets approved and processed, hopefully approved, as long as you can prove that you meet the requirements for the job being offered, you don't have any inadmissibility issues, then you come to the border, and then the officer at the border is going to do that final assessment to decide whether to give you that work permit.
All right, we'll wrap up this last question right here, which I think is a really good one. So Alexa says, can a spouse of a PNP nominee work in another province while the permanent resident application is being processed? So this is the spouse of the principal applicant. And I'm assuming the spouse is probably in that province, but I guess it's possible that, maybe this individual is working in another province, and maybe their spouse had a higher CRS and was able to get through express entry as the principal, but I doubt that. So what are your thoughts on this one as we wrap up, Alicia?
So the key thing to be aware of is that if you're doing a PNP application, if the principal applicant is doing that PNP application, they need to show an intent to live in that province. That's really important. And so it makes it a harder argument if your spouse is not living with you in the province where you're ultimately trying to get your nomination from, or you did get your nomination from, and now you're waiting for your PR to be processed. Yes, life happens though. So sometimes, for whatever reason, the spouse has had to move to another province and take a job. You're going to want to make sure that you document two things: that it's a genuine relationship, that while you guys are physically living in different provinces, you're still legitimately married to each other. Because the thing that could happen is the spouse that's not living with the principal applicant, immigration might say, well, is it a genuine marriage? Or a common law relationship? I'm not sure whether you're married or common law. But those prolonged period of absences can be a potential issue for genuineness. So that's something you want to make sure to document and prove. And the other thing is, you do want to show that at the end of the PR processing, you're going to move back and live with your spouse in the province of destination.
All right, great. Well, thank you, Alicia. Thanks for joining me today in our Canada Immigration Live Q&A, sponsored by our law firm. And I'm getting a lot of people who are new to the channel that are not aware that, yes, indeed, we are a Canadian immigration law firm full of immigration lawyers who really enjoy working and representing individuals as they go through their immigration process. But we are a little different. We are. And the difference can be found in our About Us section and when you go to our approach. And you can see here that unlike a lot of firms where they leverage lower level paralegals and assistants, and you have very little interaction with who's actually representing you, we use a collaborative model where it is direct lawyer to client contact. So it's you and us. When you book a consult with me, you have the consult with me. And if we ultimately retain our firm and you are working with any one of the lawyers in the firm, that's who you work with. So you are one-to-one with Alicia, one-to-one with me or Cedric or Chanel. So the difference is you are the one that maintains control of your application process. We find it's faster doing it this way. It saves unnecessary legal fees for you to pay us to track your files after it's submitted. And we really, truly believe that this innovation is the way of the future. And especially for all of you who are watching this now, we know you're kind of DIYers at heart, but this model, and you can learn more about it right on our website, is one that we absolutely love. And Alicia and I have been going at this for almost 20 years or so, each of us. And we've done this in a lot of different ways, but I really, really love this model, Alicia. It helps me to sleep at night so that I'm not in a position wondering if some supports person that I've been working with overlooked something and then I missed it. It's hard enough as it is. So I love that model.
Yeah, basically you're your own, like the client is their own paralegal. They know their history, they know where they've lived and their addresses, and we're the lawyers, and we take a look at that and say, well, wait, what about this? And you said you traveled here. Are you sure you put that in your address history? And let's look for gaps. And, what about that person that you were dating? Are they actually a spouse? So we're going to ask all those legal questions that can seriously affect your application. And the two of us, so you and us, are going to work together so that there's always two sets of eyes on everything. And that when you submit that application, you're sure it's correct and you get control over it. We don't take it over. We don't know your passwords or anything like that. You get to submit it and you're sure that you're getting all that communication directly from IRCC. And we're still there if you need us. You can always reach out and we can help out on an hourly basis if you need.
You bet. Full support throughout the whole process. And how do you get started? Well, it's as simple as clicking on here, and we always start off with a consultation, and you can book a consult with any of the lawyers here in the firm. Super easy to connect with Alicia. And the reason that we do this, you guys, is because we don't want you to say, hey, we want to hire your firm to help us with our express entry application. And then, so we say, okay, it'll be X dollars. And if you want to find out what all of our fees are right now, it's pretty easy. All you have to do is go to the fee section on our page, and you can see what the fees are that we charge for the various applications. And you can expand the windows here to do that. But when people are going through this process, we don't charge you for aspects of the application that we don't need to do. And part of the advantage, at least in my mind, is you DIYers out there who are nervous to just turn your application over to someone and not maybe know exactly what's going on. And that happens a lot in our industry, especially with overseas agents and things like that, where you don't even know what's being submitted. All of that is eliminated. But as Alicia has indicated, we're always here to help. So how do you do it? You click on Speak to a Lawyer. And when you do this, you then are able to choose the lawyer that you want to work with. And it gives us a chance to assess if you are even eligible. And if you're not eligible, we don't want to take your money. So that's, we don't want to have to then return it and say, hey, this is, we don't think you're eligible. So that's not our goal. But obviously, we've got our Google ratings up here, and our clients seem to like this, Alicia. They seem to appreciate it. And so we're really, really proud of that rating. And then finally, you guys, just a couple little announcements as well. If you didn't hear about it or know about it, on Monday, we start our study permit course. The masterclass kicks off. So if you haven't had a chance to register, get in right now. There's still time to do that. That link's in the link below. And we have an upcoming webinar, a free webinar with Cellpip, which is the other English language testing approved organization. IELTS is the one everybody's familiar with, but Cellpip is the other one. And we are doing a free live webinar with them. We're partnering with Cellpip to answer questions. Now, it's a general overview initially, but it is opportunities full for answering questions that you have. Now, I'm just trying to remember here. Yes, December the 20th at 1 p.m. Mountain Time is when that is going to roll. So make sure you connect in. All right. Well, Alicia, it's been really good. I appreciate you joining me today and being a part of this as always. Alicia kind of takes off some of the heavy lifting when I'm doing this on Wednesdays. So this Thursday is an opportunity for her to showcase how much smarter she is than I am. And I love moving the stuff around the screen, except when stupid YouTube doesn't allow me to pull up the comments from people into the feed, and I have to do it manually. But hey, whatever, we can make this work. We're adaptable. That's what happens as immigration lawyers. All right. Thanks, Alicia.